The Northern Ireland and most of Scotland will clear to leave brighter weather. Cloudy with some rain for southern Scotland, Wales and northern England. Mostly dry further south and a high of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
3 is a magic number. 300 schemes to help bugs and bees, supporting environmental needs. 8,000 grants for local sports, and performing arts get our support. 7 millionaires every week, the nation's on a winning streak. 30 million pounds to good causes every week. Who'd have thought it? These are magic numbers.
Your numbers make amazing happen. 25 years of the National Lottery.
Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 3 minutes past 11 on LBC. If you've been listening over the past couple of weeks, you will know that at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening, we have one politician in the studio to undertake an interview and to take your calls. Well, today it is the turn of the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Jo Swinson. Next Sunday, we've got the leader of Unite, Len McCluskey. And on Thursday, the not leader, she might be, who knows at some point, from the Brexit Party, Anne Widdecombe. Now, Jo Swinson, welcome back. So we've done this quite often over the past few months, haven't we, during the leadership campaign?
Always great to come back.
I was listening back to that interview to think, well, I don't want to ask her exactly the same questions as I asked in that one. Let's start off with Brexit because it's supposed to be the Brexit election. And I said to someone the other day that everyone knows what the Lib Dem position on Brexit is, which they can't necessarily say for most of the other parties. But I couldn't readily roll off any other Lib Dem policies. Now, is this an advantage to you where people know what your position is? Or do you think that over the campaign you are going to have to switch tack a bit and talk about other policies?
Well, we're set out our plan for the future, which obviously includes stopping Brexit, but also recognises what that will enable us to go on to do, because if we stop Brexit, there'll be more money, more tax receipts, because the economy won't take the hit that would happen if Brexit goes ahead. So that enables us to invest more in schools, so there's more teachers. It enables us to invest more in mental health, because we all know somebody, if it's not ourselves, who is struggling with their mental health. 1 in 4 of us every year. And we also know that the waits are far too long for people to get the help they need. And then if you look at the climate emergency, one of the biggest threats that we face, we've got a detailed plan to, get down our carbon emissions in lots of different sectors. So a big programme of insulating homes, a big revolution in more electricity coming from renewable sources. And just yesterday we were announcing our plans to plant a massive programme of tree planting, 60 million trees a year, which of course are one of the best ways to absorb carbon and get us to net zero earlier, as well as all the other lovely benefits of trees. I mean, we all like having green space around us, and of course they're good for air quality too. So we've got a lot of Lib Dem policies. We're looking ahead to the future and the type of country that we want to build, and stopping Brexit is part of how we get there, but it's absolutely not the only thing that we stand for.
As I said in the open, a lot of people say, well, with your policy of revoke, that isn't very democratic at all. Do you understand why people say that?
This is an election. And we're saying what we would do if we win the election. And then if we win the election, we'll then do it. That to me seems like the essence of democracy. We're in a democratic process right now, and we're setting out our stall, what we believe should happen and what we want to happen. So, I think that is perfectly fair enough for us to stand up for what we believe in, give people that choice and say, if you want to stop Brexit, here is the party to vote for to do it.
But you're not going to be Prime Minister, don't you?
Well, look, if you looked at the election in 2017 at this point in the campaign, the ultimate outcome of it was quite different to how it looked like it would be early on in the campaign. So politics is volatile and things can change. Clearly the deal between the Conservatives and Nigel Farage's Brexit Party has made circumstances more difficult. But we're saying what will happen if we win a majority. And if we don't win a majority, we'll continue to campaign to stop Brexit by securing a people's vote.
Do you not think voters look at you and think, well, I've bought all the Sunday papers this morning. Every single one shows the Lib Dems going down in the polls. You're not making any breakthrough, and yet you're still maintaining this facade that you can win the election.
Look, as I say, things might be more difficult now as a result of what's happened, that deal between the Tories and the Brexit Party. But we're going to stand up for what we believe in, and we're the party to vote for if you want to stop Brexit. One way of achieving that is a Lib Dem majority. But if we don't get a majority, our Liberal Democrat MPs will be in Parliament arguing for a people's vote in order to be able to stop Brexit.
But you see, there's a problem for you as well, because you've made very clear that you will not countenance supporting Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. Say there's a hung Parliament, which I think a lot of people still think is a probable outcome. Say the Tories get 300 seats maybe, but Jeremy Corbyn gets 270 and the SNP get 50 and you get whatever. Surely you will come under a lot of pressure then to support Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, because he will be promising a so-called people's vote, won't he?
Let me be incredibly clear about this. Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, I do not believe are fit to be Prime Minister.
But one of them's going to be. That's the problem for
they're not. They're not going to be put there by Liberal Democrat votes. And on Jeremy Corbyn, you asked the specific question. It's really simple. Jeremy Corbyn wants to deliver Brexit, and he hasn't dealt with anti-Semitism in his party. Those aren't trivial policy differences. Those are fundamental differences of values. And that's why Liberal Democrat votes will not put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10.
OK, well, let's look at another scenario. Say Jeremy Corbyn resigns as Labour leader, but they still have enough... he realises that he can't garner enough parliamentary support to carry on, but he recognises that maybe somebody like, I don't know, Hilary Benn could. Would you then support a Labour government that promises a people's vote?
You're talking about hypotheticals here.
Well, I am, because that's all we can do.
Well, indeed. But, there's a lot of people who wish the Labour Party was in a different position to what it is now. And, I will obviously, look at what happens and what develops. But my instinct is that the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn has gone off to the far left and isn't coming back anytime soon, because all of the people who are around Corbyn, it's not just one individual. There's a kind of coterie of people who have that vision, that kind of, socialist, far left vision, and that is not a moderate social democratic type Labour Party. And that's one of the reasons why so many members, voters and even MPs from the Labour Party have joined the Liberal Democrats.
So to sum up your position, would I be accurate in saying, well, no way are the Liberal Democrats going to support a Corbyn-led Labour administration if it's in a hung Parliament? But if there was a more acceptable leader, somebody who would be regarded as on the centre of the Labour Party, then you might look at that. But if the successor to Jeremy Corbyn was somebody who's essentially a Corbynista, no deal.
Yeah, I mean, Liberal Democrats, we're going to stick by our values, what we want to happen. And, I'm instinctively the kind of politician that does work with other people. I'm not overtly tribal. I think the difference that we have at the moment is both of our parties, the main parties, the Labour and Conservative parties, have gone off to the extremes. You've got the Conservative Party trying to become the Brexit Party, with Boris Johnson being endorsed by Tommy Robinson. I mean, that tells you something about where the current Conservative Party's at. And you've got the Labour Party off on the hard left. That's not where most people are in this country. Liberal Democrats are attracting support because we are standing up for, kind of rational and reasonable solutions and answers to the problems that people face in their everyday lives. And we think that there's problems that we can fix and that we can have a better country.
Now, I should have said this at the beginning of the hour, but if you'd like to watch us, we are streaming live via the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, on our YouTube channel, Facebook and Twitter feed. Now, Jo, if Brexit happens, will the Lib Dems then immediately campaign to rejoin the EU at the earliest available opportunity?
I've not given up stopping Brexit.
No, I know that.
Yeah, but I know. And
again, it's a hypothetical.
Yeah, I know. And do you know what? We're in an election where the future relationship with the EU is still under debate. We also have, stopped or delayed Brexit, twice We were supposed to be out on the 29th of March. We were supposed to be out on the 31st of October, or apparently the country was going to explode. We're still here. We're still members of the European Union. So, for those reasons, I feel that I've got, quite a degree of confidence that it's possible to stop Brexit.
I get that you're going to try and stop it. But if there is a majority Conservative government, it's kind of game over, isn't it? So we would leave the political institutions by the 31st of January. And let's, for argument's sake, say that there is some sort of at least temporary trade deal done by the end of the transition period at the end of 2020. Will the position of the Lib Dems be to start a campaign or lead a campaign to get us back in the EU at the earliest available opportunity?
Well, look, Liberal Democrats have always been a pro-European party, and that's not going to change. But let's just sort of paint the picture for a second of what that would mean, because I think there's often a bit of a myth going around that, we'd sometimes get Brexit done and then, you wouldn't need to be asking people about Brexit and you wouldn't switch on the television and see stories about Brexit. If we leave the EU, we're going to be living this Brexit chaos for years to come, because these trade deals aren't quick to negotiate, whether that's with the European Union or whether that's with other countries around the world. These things take years. And the bit that we have already negotiated with the EU is just the very, very, very beginning. It's like, series 1 of a box set. And, if you don't really like series 1 very much, you wouldn't necessarily watch all the way through to the rest.
It could be like The Crown and you can get to the end within a few months.
Well, this is not Netflix Brexit, right? So it's not that slick. This is going to be long and drawn out.
I'm slightly puzzled as to why you can't tell me whether you would campaign to go back in as soon as possible.
Well, we're always going to be pro-European. Liberal Democrats are always going to want us to have that relationship as members of the European Union. But all I'm saying is that in the immediacy, you're also going to be having those day-to-day debates in Parliament. There's going to be a need to protect our rights, our regulations that we have on things like workers' rights, on air quality, on other environmental matters. There's going to be fights week in, week out, because we know the vision of some of the people who want us to leave, who are in controlling positions in the Conservative Party, and it's about slashing regulation. It's about kind of creating a sort of, low tax, low regulation economy, and that presents a real danger for ordinary people, going to work where, their rights might well be undermined. And it presents huge dangers for our environment. So there's going to be battles to be fought constantly.
See, one reason why you might be reluctant to say, yes, we would campaign to go back in straight away is because you know that we would have to adopt the euro, because that is the rules. Anybody joining the EU has to join the euro right from the start.
Well, I think, I've had discussions in Brussels. I certainly think that the best route for us is to stop Brexit, because, of course, if we stop Brexit, then we get to keep the deal that we already have, which has the rebate, it has all of the opt-outs.
I'm moving on beyond that.
But equally, I think there's quite an appetite for change within the EU. So there's lots of different member states who are, looking to change and reform the European Union, and it may well be at a future point that we wanted to rejoin that. Actually, those requirements might not all be there.
But you recognise at the moment we would have to join the euro if we went back in.
Well, as I say, from the conversations I've had, I wouldn't assume that to be the case.
Let's talk about democracy again, because I've got a text here from Bob in Chiswick who says the president of the Liberal Democrats, Sal Brinton, said in the week outside the High Court that elections are about democratic choices, while all the time Jo Swinson is rigging the vote by standing only in selected areas. Isn't that as bad as Russian interference or dodgy money? Isn't the truth that Jo Swinson is just a mudslinger hoping some will stick?
No, is the short answer to that question.
You surprised me.
Sorry, Bob, to disagree. Look, we're standing 612 candidates across Scotland, England and Wales. So we're standing in the vast majority of constituencies. But I'm proud of the fact that we have reached an agreement in 60 constituencies where different parties are going to be standing aside, standing together, if you like, shoulder by shoulder, to make sure that we maximise the chances of more Remain supporting MPs being elected.
Who conducted the negotiations on that? Because whoever did it for you did a sterling job, didn't they? Because they absolutely stuffed the Green Party. They're standing down in 51 seats. How many are you standing down in?
17.
Exactly. I rest my case, Your Honour.
Well, look, the Liberal Democrats are the strongest, biggest party of Remain. So it's not surprising that within those negotiations, the majority of the seats where other parties are standing down are in favour of the Liberal Democrats. But I think we have acted in a generous way also to stand down in seats in favour of the Green Party or indeed in favour of Plaid Cymru in Wales. And indeed, additionally, to stand down in Anna Soubry's constituency in Broxtowe and in Beaconsfield where Dominic Grieve is standing.
Why not David Gauke? Because David Gauke publicly has urged people to vote Liberal Democrat, and yet you're putting up a candidate against him.
Look, when you look at people like Anna and Dominic, they have been supporting the People's Vote campaign. They have, months and months ago made that move and taken a stance.
David Gauke was fighting the cause in the cabinet, so he could have only done it when he left the cabinet.
Yeah, and all I would say is, that those individuals have been sacrificed their political careers effectively in the Conservative Party and fought that cause. I mean, I've been sitting around the table in meetings with Dominic and Anna for more than a year now in terms of trying to stop Brexit. Their commitment to this has been significant and long lasting, and so I'm proud that we're standing down in those constituencies.
What about Canterbury, where your candidate stood down? You've now put another one in, which will probably mean that the Conservatives win that seat, won't it?
Well, I don't make that assumption at all, looking at polling evidence. But I think the other thing to just bear in mind is,
I'm sorry, but if you look at the polling evidence, the evidence is that in a seat like that, you will now have Remain voting Labour voters switch to the Liberal Democrats, letting the Conservative in.
I think in all of this, people can be make assumptions that people switch en bloc. That doesn't necessarily happen. And particularly there are, Remain voters who won't necessarily vote for the Labour Party. And there's other reasons why people won't vote for the Labour Party. Above and beyond whatever the merits of a particular candidate are, for people who are standing on a Labour manifesto, it's about putting Jeremy Corbyn into Downing Street. I'm sure you've seen earlier this week, front page of the Jewish Chronicle, where, they talked about the genuine fear that many people in the Jewish community have about the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister.
And I get
there's good reasons why people will not vote for the Labour Party.
But there are various seats where your intervention, Finchley is another one, a Tory seat at the moment, where your candidate there, if you look at the constituency poll, is doing incredibly well. But Labour were the main challengers, and they're now trailing in a very bad third place.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to shed tears about that. We can win that seat. The Labour Party can't. And if you look at...
But that's always been a Labour-Tory marginal.
But politics has changed, right? It's not the same. You've got a Labour Party...
Kensington the same.
Yeah, and again, politics has changed, right? Sam Juma, our candidate in Kensington, has got a real chance of, winning that seat and making sure that there's an MP who is, unapologetically trying to stop Brexit in line with how most people in Kensington, vote and what they want to see. So, I'm not going to apologise for making sure that people have got the opportunity to elect fantastic MPs who will be champions for the Remain cause. And if you look at those polls, what you see is it's the Liberal Democrats who've got that opportunity to win seats from the Conservatives. So people who are worried about the Conservatives' hard Brexit, about Boris Johnson's deal with Nigel Farage and what that means about the Conservative Party, the best way to stop that is by backing the Liberal Democrats, because we're the party that can win those seats against the Conservatives. People don't seriously think the Labour Party is on course to win seats from the Conservatives in this election, but the Tories are worried that Lib Dems are going to take seats from them.
Now, because you mentioned your candidate's name in Kensington, I now have to read out all the other candidates.
I'm sorry.
And there are quite a few of them. So have a little break here while I read out the rest.
I'll have a drink of tea.
The Brexit Party, Jay Aston. Independent, Jack Boville. Conservative, Felicity Buchan. Labour, Emma Dent Code. Workers' Revolutionary, Scott Daw. Independent, Harriet Gore. Green, Vivian Lichtenstein. And the Christian People's Alliance, Roger Phillips. We got there in the end.
Bravo, Ian.
Now, you said I'm not going to apologise from a moment ago. Would you like to apologise for the fact that your candidate in Thurrock in Essex has stood down after being accused of posting racist and homophobic tweets? The screenshots that showed his social media comments have been circulating, prompting his resignation. So, I mean, all candidates have candidate issues, but you're not immune to them, are you?
No, absolutely not. I'm not going to apologise for the fact that he stood down. I mean, that was absolutely the right thing to happen, and there's obviously a disciplinary investigation underway. I think, as you say, all parties, you're talking about groups of hundreds of thousands of people. And so you're never going to have a situation where, nobody has done something wrong. What I think matters most is how do you respond when that happens, and the action in this case was swift and that was appropriate.
How does someone like that get through the process?
I mean, with the best will in the world, the candidate process, doesn't have the ability to look at somebody's entire social media history going back 10 years, and I don't think that's the case in any party. So when these things come to light, they can be dealt with. But, there's not a sort of proactive snooping on everything that somebody has ever posted on social media.
Now, what's the latest with your legal action against ITV for this debate on Tuesday, which at the moment you're not taking part in?
We are expecting that to be heard tomorrow in the High Court, and so we will get an answer, we think, tomorrow afternoon. And I'm very hopeful that I'll be heading up to Manchester to take part in that ITV debate.
Do you assume that both of the other parties blocked your taking part in that? Because I presume ITV probably would have quite liked it had you been able to take part.
Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly think it's quite likely that they'd rather not have me there, and partly because there's so many people in this country who do want to remain, and I think that voice should be heard in a debate. It seems to make sense that voice is heard. And the fact, from a broadcasting perspective, that sounds like that will be more entertaining television. And the fact that it's this doubleheader suggests that, both Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn have just said they'd like to debate each other. Thanks very much. And they're a bit scared of debating me.
But you said earlier on in the campaign when ITV announced this that you thought it was a rather sexist decision and that it was because you're a woman. Do you really believe that?
Well, I certainly think it's quite possible that that's played a part. I mean, if I look back at the 2010 election, Nick Clegg was included in the debates, and if you look at the circumstances running up to those elections, the fact that he's a bloke and I'm a woman is one of the main differences. So if it's not sexism, then it's that Boris and Jeremy are scared.
You have criticised the Conservatives and Labour for their various magic money tree announcements, but you're at it too with your £100 billion on climate change announced by Davey on Friday. That's a massive figure, isn't it?
Look, I mean, we've identified where investment needs to happen, and obviously there's a difference between what your spending is on a year-to-year basis on salaries and so on, and what spending you make on capital investment, on things which are going to increase the overall value of the country, that are investments that last for the future. And that's where we think there is more scope to, in particular, borrow more money, not, as I say, for year-to-year spending, but for things like massive installation programmes, like tree planting programmes that are going to give a lasting benefit over many years. And so, especially with borrowing costs as they are at the moment, that seems to be a sensible approach, and to tackle one of the biggest problems that we face. When I went on the Extinction Rebellion protest, when I went on the march in Glasgow with young people who were, striking for the climate, when I talk to young people, this is one of the things they are most worried about, and they are genuinely fearful because it is their future, and we do need bold action to deal with it, and that does require investment, but it is productive investment, and it's one of the things we should be prepared to borrow to fund.
But are you pitching yourselves to the right of the Tories fiscally? Because your spending commitments do not add up to as much as they do. Are you Social Democrats planning to spend more in a lot of areas, or are you economic liberals wanting to run a budget surplus? Because that's been traditionally quite a battle in the Liberal Democrats, hasn't it, between the Social Democrats and the Liberals?
I think, it's perhaps it feels a little unusual and unfashionable, but we're saying where the money's going to come from. We're being honest about how we think that in some cases taxes have to go up. So, for example, that we should put another penny on income tax, and that will particularly help to fund additional investment in the NHS. As I just said, we recognise that extra borrowing for good, productive capital investment in infrastructure and tackling the climate emergency makes sense. But we are retaining a degree of economic responsibility that I do think the other parties have rather abandoned. I don't think I would feel the need to sort of pigeonhole that in a particular way, but I think it's interesting that in this election, other parties have not felt the need to make their sums add up.
But a lot of Liberals find you quite difficult to pigeonhole because you sound a little bit left, but then they look at your record in the coalition where you voted to triple student tuition fees, you voted for all the NHS reforms, you voted to cap welfare for the unemployed, you voted to cut payments for the terminally ill, you voted to cut the education budget, you voted for the bedroom tax, you voted to remove legal aid, you voted for tax cuts for the richer people, you voted to remove workers' protection. I mean, I could go on. And those are all quite right-wing things that you personally supported.
So I was a minister in the coalition government, and you know, as I do, that collective responsibility means that you support the whole programme of measures that the government is putting through. That was a coalition government. It wasn't a Liberal Democrat government. And so there were definitely things that the coalition did that a Liberal Democrat government would not do. And there were things which I think we got wrong, and I've been very upfront about that, things we should definitely do differently in future. And if you look, our manifesto obviously will be published shortly, but if you look at what we're setting out for the future, I think that gives a guide to where we are prioritising, and that is about extra spending on children's futures through our schools and education, extra spending on childcare to support families who are struggling with unaffordable childcare costs, extra spending on the welfare system. And we did, let's also look at what happened when the Liberal Democrats left government. The Conservatives then pushed through £12 billion of extra welfare cuts that we'd stopped them doing.
Sure, but
and
a lot of
introduced
people
the
look at that list
cap.
and they think, well, if there was a Jeremy Corbyn government and there was an equivalent list of spending more on the health service, all sorts of other things, surely you could bring yourself to support those, even just as you supported those Conservative policies.
I've been clear, and I'll be clear again. Jeremy Corbyn is supporting Brexit. And by the way, if people are concerned about austerity and concerned about the impact on poorer people in our society, the worst thing we can do is leave the European Union because of the impact that's going to have on jobs and on businesses and the amount of tax that we get in, and therefore what we are allowed and able to spend on helping people. So, the austerity that will be caused by Brexit is something which neither of the other two parties is admitting at the moment, but is absolutely at the heart of the problems with their plans.
Two final quick questions. Did you see the Prince Andrew interview last night?
I did see the Prince Andrew interview.
What did you make of it? Was it a wise thing for him to have done?
Clearly not. The only person that came out of that interview well was Emily Maitlis, who did a very good job. What I found hard to watch was, the victims in this affair are those young women and girls, some of whom are now much older, who had been sexually abused, trafficked by Epstein. And the experience that they had was traumatic. And in a sense, for somebody to be talking about it without really referencing that, without understanding that, without, reaching out to understand that pain and how they must have felt, I just thought was strange to see. And there was another bit that really troubled me, apart from the sort of describing the behaviour as unbecoming, which, was the biggest understatement. But when he talked about the act of having sex is a positive act for a man. And I thought, well, do you not think it's a positive act for a woman? Because having sex is a positive act for, both parties involved in it, whether you're a man or a woman. Because if it's not a positive act, if it's not a positive choice, that's not sex, that's rape. And so, that I found quite a worrying line. So yeah, I was quite dismayed watching it.
Final question. What is your attitude to squirrels?
I like squirrels.
Have you seen this meme that's going around the internet about Jo Swinson blasted by animal rights charities after harrowing footage found on private Facebook? The Liberal Democrat leader can clearly be seen loading a slingshot with pebbles and firing them at squirrels in her garden. Now, I assumed this was a spoof story, which it clearly is.
Yes.
But so many people seem to be taking it seriously. So this is your opportunity to declare your love for squirrels, both grey and red.
Well, indeed. I don't see red very often, but obviously we have them in some parts of Scotland. Yeah, I think this sort of fake news thing is actually, it's surprising to me now that I'm the leader of a party to be, and this isn't the only one. There's been various other very fake news stories. Sometimes, using a byline of an established journalist. There was one that was made up by, and it used Peter Walker's name from The Guardian, and he, went online to debunk it and say, look, I never wrote this. But I mean, they're quite sophisticated, and that people can believe them. And I do think it's worrying because it has echoes of what we've seen in other elections. And particularly when you think about fake news and the technological possibility for deep fakes where, videos can be faked, then, yeah, I mean, I think that there's questions about, the role of publishers in circulating this kind of thing, which is untrue, because it's actually very difficult to prevent its spread.
I think the problem is that a lot of people want to believe these things that they read. I remember seeing a tweet ostensibly from Chuka Ramuna about how he'd never be seen dead with a Liberal Democrat rosette on from 2014, which I tweeted because I did think, just you see it, you tweet it because you think it's quite funny, but actually it was manufactured.
Exactly, and I think, as you say, it's almost, I think this is partly the way our politics has become really toxic. It's that, somebody is vilified and there's different groups online that, I'm a target for attack, whether that's Corbynistas or Brexiteers or cybernats, right?
You could be target for attack in the next 25 minutes or so from our listeners. We'll see, because there's lots of calls lining up for you.
Having a conversation, I always find is better than the kind of anonymous stuff you get on social media.
Before we get to the calls, let's get some latest news headlines at 11:33 from Simon Conway.
The Liberal Democrat leader, Jo Swinson, has told LBC it was clearly not wise for Prince Andrew to have spoken out in a TV interview about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. The Duke of York categorically denied accusations he had sex with an American woman, including when she was aged 17. On the general election campaign trail this morning, Labour is proposing to offer free dental checkups for everyone in England. The Conservatives are promising equal immigration rules for EU nationals and those from other countries after Brexit. A teenager has been arrested after a 20-year-old man died from stab wounds in Bournemouth last night. Detectives are questioning an 18-year-old on suspicion of murder. LBC weather, cloudy with some rain for southern Scotland, Wales and northern England. Becoming brighter for Northern Ireland and the rest of Scotland. Mostly dry for southern parts of the UK, a high of 10 degrees.
LBC.
With the new Halifax Family Boost mortgage, children can get help to buy their first home and mum and dad earn interest on their savings. Everyone's a winner.
Everyone's a winner, baby, that's true.
The new Halifax Family Boost mortgage. Halifax makes it happen.
Your home and savings could be at risk if mortgage repayments are not maintained. Only available in England and Wales. One applicant must hold a Halifax Reward or Ultimate Reward current account. Conditions and exclusions apply.
'Tis the season to tick off their wish list at Robert Dyer's. Right now, save up to a third on gifts, including tech, toys and games, as well as up to half price on kitchen, audio and selected DIY. And don't forget your batteries. Get 16 Duracell Ultra for just £10. Visit one of our 93 stores or click and collect at robertdyers.co.uk.
What is back and lay betting? Backing is a traditional bet, like betting that the action hero will save the day. But on the Betfair exchange, you can lay a bet, which is betting on the same thing not happening and taking money from those who think it won't. Why not give it a try? The Betfair exchange.
T's and C's apply. Exchange basic package customers pay 2% commission. Other charges may apply. 18 plus. BeGambleAware.org.
Choose Swale Heating and you get a lot more than an efficient boiler from top manufacturers like Quista Bosch. There are warranties of up to 10 years, experts to install your boiler, a 24/7 call centre and specialist advice on smart heating technology. Visit swaleheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
If a bank or financial advisor persuaded you to move your savings into an ISA, unit trust or investment bond and you lost money, you can make a claim for compensation. If unsuccessful, you can then refer it free to the Financial Ombudsman. Now, if the prospect of pursuing a claim feels a little daunting or you just don't have the time, then you can ask Goodwin Barrett for help. To discover how much you may be owed, text GOOD to 60777. Text GOOD to 60777 now.
Goodwin Barrett.
Gosh, can we put the heating on?
Sorry, it's broken.
Can I play some tunes on my phone then?
Yeah, afraid not. Play CDs though.
This car belongs in a scrapyard.
I know, but I get nothing if I scrapped it.
Actually, you can get at least £2,000 off a new Ford for it.
Really?
With Ford's new for old scrappage scheme, you can get between £2,000 and £4,250 off a new Ford car if you scrap an eligible vehicle with us responsibly. Also, there's 0% APR representative on Ford options. Ford. Together, we go further. Search Ford Scrappage. Exclusions apply. Contracted and registered by 31st of December 2019 at participating dealers. Age and ownership criteria apply to scrappage vehicle. Subject to status. Free post Ford credit.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 11:37. You can watch us on Facebook, on Twitter, on the LBC YouTube channel or the website at lbc.co.uk. I'm going to apologise because I went slightly over my time, so I'm going to ask everybody to ask quite brief questions, and I'm going to ask Jo to give reasonably concise answers, and then we can get as many of you in as possible. Simon's in Orpington. Hello, Simon.
Hello, good morning to you both. Jo, my question for you is Caroline Lucas recently described your Brexit position of revoking as a screw you, and she used slightly less polite words, but as a screw you to the 17.4 million voters. Paddy Ashdown said he would forgive no one for failing to accept the sovereign voice of the British people. So with that said, how would you answer those people, and do you think revoking Brexit is a good way of uniting the country?
Well, thanks for the question, Simon. I don't agree with Caroline Lucas in her characterisation of what she said. Look, I'm setting out our position. People have got the choice to vote for it in an election, and if we win the election, then that's exactly what we're going to do. And if we don't, we're going to continue to press for a people's vote, where a specific Brexit deal will be put to the public with the choice to vote for it or to remain in the EU. So I think this is about giving people that choice and recognising that, you know, many people want to have their say on the specific Brexit deal and what's happened with the Brexit chaos in the last 3.5 years.
Simon?
OK, well, I mean, there's some logic to that, Jo. Would you add a caveat then that if you won the election with greater than 17.4 million voters, then you'd revoke Article 50 and that way it would cancel it out? Would you add that caveat?
I'm not adding that caveat, but if you want to join me in campaigning to change the electoral system that we have, I'd be delighted to have your support in that, Simon, because I do think it needs reform.
If Boris Johnson, in his manifesto, says we will leave with no deal at the end of the transition period if there's not a trade deal organised, negotiated by then, under your logic, that is a mandate to do that, and you then presumably wouldn't vote against it.
Well, I would vote against it because I don't think it's the right thing to do.
But he would have the mandate to do it,
hang on a second. I mean, what's the reverse? I mean, you know, if I win a majority and want to revoke Article 50, would I expect Conservative MPs to just agree with that? Well, no, I wouldn't. So I would still expect them to be challenging that. And so, you know, in an election where people are electing MPs on the basis of particular platforms, you know, if one side does receive a majority, that's obviously very uncertain at this point, but if one side receives a majority, then they will have the votes potentially to put that through, but you wouldn't expect those in the opposition to agree with it.
No, you're right, but one of your arguments was all against a no-deal Brexit was that no one voted for it. Well, this time they would have done, wouldn't they?
Well, my arguments against a no-deal Brexit are also that it's going to cause, you know, medicine shortages, you know, food shortages. You know, the government's own analysis about that is pretty damning. And so I'm not going to support a course of action that I think is going to be damaging to, you know, the people in Eastern Bartonshire, the people in Scotland, the people right across the United Kingdom. I'm going to stand up for what I think is right.
Just very briefly, Harry Cole from the Mail on Sunday has just tweeted that a source is telling him that the People's Vote campaign is 24 hours from total collapse. The source says, I think we are, and then there's a word which ends in ED and begins with F. Your reaction?
I haven't seen that particular tweet. Obviously, some of the challenges have been documented. I think that, you know, the Liberal Democrats have been really strongly arguing for a People's Vote. We've been doing that since before the People's Vote campaign itself came together. And, you know, whatever the organisational difficulties, the fundamental fact that there's a movement of people that want to see, you know, a referendum on the specific Brexit deal, they want to stop Brexit, that's not going to change, even if the specific shape of the organisation does.
OK, Annie's in Carnforth. Go ahead, Annie.
Oh, hello. Good morning, Jo.
Good morning, Annie.
My partner and I are both disabled, and when you were in government, coalition government with the Conservatives, you voted consistently against benefit rises, and you voted to introduce the new disability benefit PIP and universal credit and the bedroom tax. And the introduction of PIP has meant that 250,000 disabled people have had their benefits cut or lost them altogether, and 50,000 of them have lost their Motability cards. Plus, cuts to local authorities have meant that 1.5 million older and disabled people who need care aren't getting it. So why should disabled and older people trust you or vote for the Lib Dems with a voting record like yours?
Well, thank you for the chance to talk to you about this, Annie. We didn't get everything right within the coalition. We did fight the Conservatives very hard on a lot of these issues, and some of those battles we won and some of those battles we didn't.
What did you win?
Well, I mean, we won, for example, we did increase benefits every year while we were in coalition, but when we left the coalition government, the Conservatives introduced the benefits freeze. That would be one example. Again, we also stopped £12 billion of cuts to welfare that George Osborne wanted to push through. And then in 2015, when the Conservatives were on their own, they did that, as well as obviously other things where we got more money for the poorest pupils in schools through the pupil premium. So we did win battles, but we didn't win them all. And of course, I am... I feel really bad that we didn't win them all, but it doesn't mean that I will stop fighting. And that's why our manifesto is setting out more investment in the welfare system, particularly also looking at the work capability assessments, which have been so badly delivered, with people getting judgments that don't make any sense and a really high rate of wrong decisions that put people through a huge amount of stress and worry. So we would make that a much better system where the people that were making the decisions about those benefits actually had an understanding of the medical conditions, the disabilities that people are living with, because people should be getting the support that they need, and that isn't always happening. And I recognise that some of that is because of things that we got wrong, and we've learned from that.
Okay, Annie, thank you. Let's go to Simon in Hampstead. Simon, your question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I come from the Jewish community, which is very small in this country, as you'll be aware. And frankly, every discussion at the moment is whether if there was a Labour government in power, whether there would be a Jewish community in this country, whether people would stay in this country, etc. And I know that you've considered that. Just if I vote Conservative, I know that the chances are it is less likely it will be a Labour government. If I vote Lib Dem, I'm not sure about that, because there could be circumstances where characters change in the party, where they give the Liberal Democrats certain agreements on the referendum or Brexit or other issues, which frankly to the community right now are secondary issues because they're thinking about way of life. Is there any circumstance whatsoever your party could support a Labour government being in power?
Certainly not under this Labour leadership, because I mean, Simon, when I hear yourself and people like you in the Jewish community talking about how they feel, the fear that they have on a day-to-day basis because of the response of Labour to anti-Semitism and the wider change in debate and what that means for real people's lives, it is heartbreaking. And that's why I'm being so clear about Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, and that extends to those who are around him who, are acting in a similar way. I don't treat every person in the Labour Party, I don't tar everybody with the same brush. And I have worked and will continue to work on a cross-party basis with people, in the Labour Party and indeed in the Conservative Party, as we have done on the People's Vote campaign. But that's very different to putting Jeremy Corbyn in power. Liberal Democrat votes will never do that.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. We'll take more of your calls in a second to Jo Swinson. It's 11:45.
This is LBC.
Money. How does that word make you feel? You might be thinking about what you'd love to spend it on, or what you have to spend it on. Maybe you think you're just bad with money, but here's the thing. You're not. You're just with the wrong bank. At Starling Bank, we want you to feel good about money. So we built a personal and business bank account with clever budgeting tools, instant payment alerts, and no fees when you spend overseas. Starling Bank, voted Britain's best bank twice. Download the app today. Smart Money People Awards. Eligibility criteria applies.
'Tis the season to deck the halls at Robert Dyas. Right now, save a third on Christmas trees, lights and decorations, including pre-lit trees and lights in sets of 20 LEDs, up to a staggering $800. Visit one of our 93 stores or click and collect at over 250 locations nationwide at robertdyas.co.uk.
With the worst of winter just around the corner, you don't want to come home to a broken boiler. We're with you. So that's why with British Gas Home Care, we've got your boiler covered 365 days a year. We have thousands of engineers on hand to help get your boiler up and running again. And all from just 46p a day. Get a gift card worth up to £75 when you buy selected home care products online by the 27th of November. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
My name's Luke. I live in Dunstable with my wife and 4 daughters. We've got a Ring doorbell too out the front. Every time there's someone who comes up to the door, it notifies my phone, and then I can actually see if there's anyone dodgy at the door. A while ago, we had an incident at the house. My wife and I was in bed about 1:30 in the morning. We got a notification on my Ring app on my phone. So I looked on the actual video itself, and it showed me that he was trying to get underneath the mat to see if there was a key there so he can actually get into the house. The video clip allowed the police to see exactly who was in front of the camera and where that person was touching the door, and that allowed the crime scene technician to dust for prints. Thanks to the video clip and his fingerprints, that was enough to convict him. The most important thing for me is when I'm not here during the night, I need to know that the family's safe, and Ring Doorbell does that.
Join Luke and the millions of people protecting their homes with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
Millions of people are missing out by having a current account that doesn't pay them any interest on their hard-earned money. TSB offers interest to all their Plus account customers for no monthly fee. Plus, you can stop your friends and family missing out by recommending the Plus account to them. And when they switch, you'll both earn £75. Search online or visit your local branch. Terms and conditions apply.
For many sufferers of complex regional pain syndrome, life can be a living hell. If this is you, St Pancras Clinical Research would like to hear from you. We are conducting a new clinical research trial for CRPS at our Comfortable Clinic in central London. For more information, please go to stpancrasclinicalresearch.com. That's stpancrasclinicalresearch.com.
Coming up at 12 on LBC, Majid Nawaz.
British soldiers may have murdered children and tortured civilians, but Boris Johnson will pledge not to investigate soldiers for crimes that are over 10 years old. Do you agree?
Majid Nawaz on LBC. Iain Dale on LBC.
And I'm with Jo Swinson, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. She's taking your calls. Julie is a new caller in Hammersmith. Hi, Julie.
Yeah, hello, Ian. I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, you're
I'm
so
a new
kind.
Convert to LBC.
Excellent.
I would like, yes. I would like to ask a question about the rights of refugees and asylum seekers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because the Lib Dems, I would like to ask if Jo, if she's going to reverse Theresa May's hostile environment strategy, which removed the right to automatic settlement, which means if you get granted asylum status, you have to again reapply or go through again another rigorous scrutiny after 5 years. And this ruins lives because you cannot make plans for the future.
Okay, Jo?
Yeah, first of all, Julie, good to chat with you. I think the hostile environment has been a huge failure, and I think our country is better than that. Do you know, the response that we saw to the Windrush scandal, I thought was so cheering, because the public were, people were rightly scandalised that so many people who had lived here for so long, who were part of our community, then faced being deported and having huge amounts of bureaucracy and fear and worry because of the Home Office and their hostile environment, their assumption of suspicion constantly. So I don't think the Home Office should be in charge of the immigration policy. In terms of asylum seekers, we say
who should be then?
We think it should be the business department, because the
Really?
yeah, we do. I mean, in terms of much of immigration, obviously not asylum. It's about economic benefit to the country, and I think that would lead to a much more sensible policy. But we would also make some specific changes. For example, letting asylum seekers work after they've been here for 3 months, because people who come here, they want to work and to use their skills, and I think at the moment we're basically leaving many people destitute as they go through a system that takes months and months. So I think there's a big there are specific changes in the system needed, and there's also a cultural step change in just recognising the benefits that we have of people coming to this country, and indeed as a country, when we accept asylum seekers, of us providing that sanctuary, which is we are that country. We are generous and open-minded, and we recognise our wider responsibility in the world.
Just while we're on the subject, the Tories have announced new policies on immigration today. Just give me yes or no answers to these. They're saying migrants should pay a £625 surcharge on arrival to cover health costs, whether from the EU or not.
No.
Ban migrants from coming to Britain without a job unless they're scientists or entrepreneurs.
No.
Stop paying child benefit to migrants whose children live abroad.
No. Sorry, yes. Sorry, yes. Do not stop that. So that's a no. I'm just getting confused with the double negatives there.
Prevent people from claiming benefits unless they've been here for 5 years.
No, I mean, this is all sort of predicated on an assumption that people coming to our country are somehow trying to do us over. I mean, yesterday I was sitting and speaking to a group of EU citizens who have come here. They've made their lives here. There was one woman who I spoke to whose father came here in the 1960s from Italy. And he had come here for opportunities, and he felt he'd been given opportunities by this country, and he'd then set up a business, and then over the course of his life he's employed hundreds of people. This is a mutual good thing. It's good for people who come to this country, and it's good for our country. And at the moment we cause fear in those communities with the hoops we're making people jump through for settled status, and it's just, we're better than this. We should be better than this.
Julie, thank you very much for your call. Andrew's in Hull. Very different question from you, Andrew.
Yes, indeed, not political.
Well, I don't know about that. Well, unless you're going to ask something that's not on my screen.
Take, Mr. Dale, not mine. Okay, that shows your bias, does it not?
Does it? Well, go on.
Yes, it does indeed. You know the question I'm going to ask.
Well, he does. I don't. Yeah, I'm really interested now.
Okay, so Jo Swinson, what do you think of a government that shuts down the report on the Russian meddling in our elections 2 or 3 weeks away from an election?
I don't know how that's not political, but anyway, Jo.
Well, Andrew, I think you're absolutely right. The premise of your question is, why is the government doing this? And you just have to ask that question. Why do we think they're doing this? Well, probably because there's something in it that they don't want us to know. We're in an election. Do we all not? Every one of us deserve to know what is in that report about how the Russians might have tried to influence our elections. I think we do. And I think it's shocking that this government has covered that up, has refused to release it.
What do you think is in the report?
Well, I don't know. I'm not on the relevant committee, the Security Committee, but Dominic Grieve, respected Member of Parliament, former Attorney General, he's on that committee, and he has been arguing for this report to be released. And that to me says that there are things in that report that we deserve to know. And whether that's about who has tried to influence, whether that's about particular people who have been bankrolling other parties, I don't know the specifics. But I think it's very suspicious, as Andrew says, a few weeks before an election, that report is not being released.
Mark is in Hitchin. Mark, go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning to you both. Jo, you made an announcement that you intend to run a 1% surplus on current spending, which means the day-to-day cost of public services. Now, the Conservatives are saying they're going to do that within the next 3 years. Labour said that they're going to achieve balancing that budget within the next 5 years. As you've not announced any significant rises in tax, this is almost, to achieve that, it'd be austerity on steroids. So how are you actually going to fund doing a 1% surplus?
Not at all. I mean, one big difference between our plans and both the Conservative and Labour plans is that under the Liberal Democrats, we would stay in the European Union, and that would unlock a significant boost to our economy compared to what they are proposing, because it doesn't kind of matter which economic analysis you look at, which think tank, whether it's the government, whether it's whether it's the OBR, the consensus is the same. We will be poorer if we leave the European Union, there will be less money around. Whereas if we stay, that is better for our businesses, it is better for jobs, and it's better for making sure that we've got the tax revenues coming in to invest in public services. And we've calculated a £50 billion Remain bonus if we stay in over the course of the next 5 years. So that's the big difference between the Liberal Democrat spending plans and the Conservative and Labour ones.
OK, Mark, thank you. Peter's in Hendon. Peter, what would you like to ask?
I would like to say that the Liberal Democrats are focusing attention on gender-neutral uniform for school children, when our educational standards are appalling, and and that's why I maintain that anyone with any maturity cannot vote for Liberal Democrats. My children want to vote Liberal Democrat, and I'm begging them to make an official protest vote. And I don't know how we can trust you when you know better than anybody else that you're not supposed to mention a candidate's name. So my question to you is, how can we trust you when you are as disingenuous as this?
This comes from this story. I think that schools to be ordered to let children wear gender-neutral uniforms under Lib Dem proposals, separate dress codes for children branded totally out of order.
Yeah, look, I mean, if I think about what our main offer is about schools, we're talking about funding 20,000 extra teachers, because we know that schools have got a problem. They've had to sack teachers. They've had to be fundraising for basics. So there's more money needed. But we want all children to be able to go to school and learn in an environment that's comfortable for them. We all know that people aren't going to do as well if they're not feeling comfortable. And I just think, why should we be forcing girls into wearing skirts if they want to wear trousers? It just seems
simple solution.
Crazy.
Abolish school uniforms. One of my little hobby horses.
Well, you see though, Iain, there's part of me as a Liberal that likes that, but then as a parent, the ease of every single morning, just knowing exactly what the school uniform is.
Anything for an easy life, Jo. It works quite well in Germany, so I don't see why it can't happen here. That's the most pro-European thing you're going to hear me say today. Jo Swinson, thank you very much. If you missed any of this, you can catch it on the Cross Question podcast, or the YouTube channel will have the full video as soon as I stop speaking in this hour. Not quite finished yet, because I want to tell you we have our minor party Cross Question tomorrow at 8 with the leader of the SDP, the leader of the old Liberal Party, the leader of Renew, and Neil Hamilton from UKIP. So tune in for that. And then on Thursday, it's Anne Widdicombe for an hour at 8. Coming up at 3, it's Ian Payne, but next on LBC, Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Jo. Coming up, a group of